Most people will die without ever hearing what you're about to discover. Not because it's hidden, because they never looked. But you're here. And once these truths hit you, they won't leave quietly.
So many questions. Why is the world spinning? Why is the moon keeping its orbit? Can rockets fly backwards? The facts you didn't know you needed. The Useless Show.
When making clothes, fabric has invisible lines running through it. But if you cut across those lines diagonally, it's called a bias. That angle gives clothes a soft, stretchy feeling that fits better. It's like cutting into magic. Suddenly, stiff cloth moves like liquid. The technique was famously popularized by fashion designers like Madeleine Vionnet in the early 20th century. Canada and Greenland may seem far apart on a map, but guess what? They're actually just a short stretch apart, only about 16 miles. On a clear day, you could almost shout across the icy waters. It's wild how two massive, chilly lands can be such close neighbors, connected by more than just cold winds and curiosity. Every once in a blue lobster's lifetime, one is literally born blue. Not green, not brown, bright electric blue. It's super rare, like one in millions. Scientists think it's because of a special genetic twist. Finding one is like discovering a glowing jewel in the sea. And when it happens, people gather like it's an underwater miracle. Even though the name Haagen-Dazs sounds super fancy and European, it's actually made up by folks in New York. They wanted the ice cream to sound like it came from somewhere exotic, so they tossed in cool letters like A and Z's. Truth is, the name doesn't mean anything. On every Rolls-Royce, there's a little silver statue on the front that looks like a woman flying. That's called the Spirit of Ecstasy. It's not just decoration. It's a symbol of elegance and speed. She leans forward like she's about to soar, turning each car into something that doesn't just drive, but glides with drama. Believe it or not, the unicorn is the official national animal of Scotland. Not lions, not dragons, an imaginary horned horse, but it makes sense. Unicorns represent purity, strength, and wild beauty, which Scotland has in spades. It's like the whole country decided to believe in magic, and then made it official on paper. Before Europe became a super team called the European Union, it had a smaller club called the European Community. From way back in the old days until the early 90s, countries tried to stick together, share stuff, and avoid fighting. Think of it like a group project before it finally became official and got a cooler name. The first time Voice of America ever spoke to the world through radio waves was on a winter day, February 24, 1942, right in the middle of World War II. And they didn't open with flair or fanfare. They simply said, "The news may be good, the news may be bad, but we'll tell you the truth." At a time when propaganda poisoned the air like smoke, those words felt like a gust of clean, honest wind. Mont Blanc rises so high, 4,808 meters, or over 15,000 feet. It looks like it's trying to shake hands with the sky. Perched between France and Italy, it's the tallest point in all of continental Europe. Wrapped in snow and kissed by clouds, it's a sacred playground for climbers. In Hawaii's quiet waters, a white memorial floats above the wreck of the USS Arizona, still resting where it sank on December 7, 1941. That day, Japanese forces launched a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, and the Arizona took a direct hit. Over 1,100 sailors and Marines were lost in moments. Today, that peaceful white span isn't just a structure, it's a grave for heroes. Marcus Allen was the first player in history to win a Heisman Trophy, a Super Bowl, and be named NFL MVP. He retired with over 12,000 rushing yards and held the record for most rushing touchdowns at the time, 123. His 74-yard touchdown run in Super Bowl XVIII remains one of the game's most iconic moments. There was a queen named Catherine the Great, Empress of Russia, who loved collecting art so much, her collection turned into one of the largest museums in the entire world. What started as her personal treasure chest became the State Hermitage Museum in Russia, where every room is like a page from the most beautiful, colorful storybook ever imagined. In Osaka, Japan, the Umeda Hankyu building stands tall, with 41 floors, and was completed in 2012. Located in the bustling Umeda Commercial District, it serves as the headquarters for Hankyu Hanshin Holdings. One of its standout features is its massive elevators, some of the largest in Japan, each capable of carrying up to 80 passengers at a time. Explorer 1, the first satellite the United States launched, lifted off on January 31, 1958, during the early space race. The craft measured about 6 feet long, roughly 1 8/10 meters, and weighed nearly 31 kilograms, similar to a small refrigerator. Monaco is a small, independent country on the Mediterranean coast, bordered by France. Its entire coastline stretches just about 4.1 kilometers, or roughly 2.5 miles. The total land area is only around 2 square kilometers, making it the second smallest country in the world. Despite its size, it's known for luxury tourism, casinos, and the Monaco Grand Prix. Before stepping into politics, Ronald Reagan spent years on television. From 1954 to 1962, he hosted the General Electric Theater, a weekly TV anthology series. As part of his role, he also toured GE plants, delivering speeches and mingling with workers. These years sharpened his public speaking and quietly launched his path toward the presidency. The Wonder Wheel at Coney Island has been spinning since 1920, making it over a century old. Standing 150 feet tall and weighing around 200 tons, it holds 24 passenger cars, 16 of which swing along a curved track. Each car seats 6, so up to 144 people can ride at once. The lion's mane jellyfish is one of the longest animals ever recorded, with tentacles that once stretched 160 feet, longer than a blue whale. Found in cold northern waters, it stings and stuns prey with its long trailing arms. It's part creature, part underwater power strip. Honestly, if hair could kill, this jellyfish would be Rapunzel's worst nightmare. In ancient Rome, vulgar wasn't an insult. It was just how everyday people talked. While poets and scholars scribbled in polished Latin, farmers, soldiers, and market vendors spoke vulgar Latin, the raw, street-level version. It wasn't elegant, but it was alive. And here's the twist. That unrefined language eventually evolved into modern Spanish, French, Italian, and more. The Flatiron Building in New York City doesn't just look unusual. It's shaped like a giant wedge, almost like a slice of pizza standing on its crust. Completed in 1902, it was one of the city's first skyscrapers. Its triangular design made it a marvel of engineering at the time, and today, it's a favorite photo stop for visitors and locals alike. You know that catchy Kit Kat song, "Give Me a Break"? That jingle came from a group of creative minds in the 80s working at an ad agency. They mixed a simple tune with a sweet message and created a commercial so powerful, people still sing it today. It's stuck in our heads like chocolate on fingers. There's a tiny fish called the Siamese fighting fish that has a seriously bad temper. If it sees its own reflection in a mirror, it thinks it's an enemy and starts flaring its fins and charging. It's like a warrior in fish form, small, sparkly, and ready to battle even itself. Every few years, the Pacific Ocean throws a tantrum called El Nino. It messes with the weather. Some places flood, others dry up, and everything feels out of balance. It's like the ocean is flipping the world's thermostat. People can't stop it, only watch and prepare. Nature reminds us who's really in charge when it decides to get moody. Passover is a Jewish festival where, for 8 days, people avoid eating anything with leavened bread. No fluffy loaves, no soft rolls. It's a powerful reminder of when their ancestors had to leave Egypt so quickly they didn't have time to let their bread rise. So now they eat flat bread called matzah and remember freedom's price. On a giant mountain called Mount Shasta, snow once fell so heavily during one storm that it piled up taller than a 4-story building. Imagine walking outside and the snow being higher than your house. That storm dumped more snow in one blast than most places see in a year. Nature knows how to flex its muscles. Long ago at a place called DuPont, scientists created a strange, bendy material called neoprene. It looked like rubber, but wasn't natural. They made it from chemicals, and suddenly, people had wetsuits, laptop sleeves, and even medical gear that didn't tear or rot. That soft, stretchy stuff changed how we live, and it started in a lab. In the hills of Uruguay, the land rises up in sharp, jagged ridges they call Cuchilla Grande. That name means big knife, and one look makes it obvious why. These rocky lines slice across the earth like frozen waves. Farmers, travelers, and dreamers all look up at those hills and feel like they're walking beside ancient giants. In the tiny state of Rhode Island, the striped base swims like it owns the place, and honestly, it kinda does, with racing stripes down its sides and a fighting spirit that gives anglers sore arms. It's no surprise it's the official state fish. Around here, catching one isn't just sport. It's bragging rights, dinner, and a fishtail all in one. There was a powerful queen named Blanche of Castile who ruled France while her son, King Louis, left for the Crusades. She wasn't just filling in. She took charge, made decisions, and kept the kingdom from falling apart. She combined maternal care with political acumen, protecting her son's interests and the realm's stability. In her 1969 book On Death and Dying, psychiatrist Elizabeth Kubler-Ross introduced the idea that grief often moves through 5 stages: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. It wasn't meant as a strict rule, but a way to understand the emotional waves people face after a loss. Her work helped shape how the world talks about mourning and healing. James Bone Crusher Smith wasn't just a powerhouse in the boxing ring. He also had a sharp mind outside of it. While climbing his way to become a heavyweight champion, he earned a degree in business from Alcorn State University. At a time when few boxers had college degrees, Bone Crusher showed you could bring both brains and brute force to the fight. A docket sounds like something from a wizard's book, but in courtrooms is actually just a fancy word for a list. It shows which cases are up next and who's involved. Think of it like a movie theater lineup, except instead of popcorn and action flicks, it's lawyers, judges, and stories that could change people's lives forever. In ancient Greece, there was a queen named Clytemnestra, whose story is a tangled mess of love, betrayal, and murder. Some say she killed her husband Agamemnon. Others say she didn't. Depending on whether the storyteller was Homer or Aeschylus, the ending changed. It's one of those old myths where nobody really knows who's the villain. The Pony Express didn't last very long, just under 2 years. But during that time, it carried mail across rough land, bad weather, and real danger. Riders switched horses often and rode day and night without stopping. It was one of the fastest ways to send messages back then, until the telegraph came along and replaced it. Dennis Wilson from the Beach Boys wasn't just singing about surfing, he was actually out there doing it. While the rest of the band sang the vibe, Dennis lived it. He paddled into waves, wiped out, and got sunburned like a real surfer. His salty hair and tanned skin weren't costumes. They were proof of the life he loved. If even one fact twisted your perspective, you're exactly who this channel is made for. Like, comment, subscribe, and stay ahead of the curve. During the Civil War, the very first Union Army was called the Army of the Potomac. These soldiers were the main force fighting in the East. They marched, camped, and battled through some of the bloodiest chapters of American history. Through thick fog and heavy losses, they carried the hopes of a divided country on their tired shoulders. There's a medal called the Purple Heart, and right in the center of it is the face of George Washington. It's not just shiny metal, it's given to soldiers who were wounded or killed in action. The medal was established in 1932 to honor George Washington's legacy. Pico de Orizaba is the highest volcanic mountain in North America and the 3rd highest peak on the continent overall. Located on the border between the Mexican states of Puebla and Veracruz, it stands at 5,636 meters, about 18,491 feet above sea level. Though dormant, it's still classified as a potentially active stratovolcano. Before being president, Woodrow Wilson was deep into books and ideas. He studied, taught, and eventually became the first U.S. president to earn a Ph.D. That means he didn't just want power. He wanted knowledge. He treated ideas like weapons, believing smart leaders made strong nations. Wilson earned a Ph.D. in political science and history from Johns Hopkins University in 1886. You know when your clothes mysteriously get little holes in them? It's not full-grown moths doing that. It's actually their babies. Those tiny, hungry larvae chew through your favorite shirt like it's a midnight snack. So if your sweater looks like it fought a battle and lost, blame those baby moths, not their fluttery parents. There was this guy named Washington Roebling who became the boss of building the Brooklyn Bridge. The cool part? His dad, John Roebling, had designed the whole thing. But when his dad passed away, Washington didn't give up. He kept going, turning his father's dream into a giant bridge that still stands strong today, connecting two worlds. In Springfield, Illinois, there's a little place called the Cozy Dog Drive-In, and that's where the corn dog was born. Someone had the genius idea to stick a hot dog on a stick, dip it in batter, and fry it till it was golden. It wasn't just a snack. It was the crunchy start of fair food history. Back in the late 50s and early 60s, people couldn't stop watching cowboys. Two Western shows, Gunsmoke and Wagon Train, were the most watched things on TV. Cowboys, horses, and dusty towns filled the screen. Families gathered around the television like it was a glowing campfire, listening to stories of justice, outlaws, and dusty boots under wide skies. In the European Union, voting power is based on a system called qualified majority voting, which weighs both a country's population and the number of member states in agreement. Germany and France currently hold the most influence due to their large populations. Italy also has significant voting weight. However, the United Kingdom is no longer part of the EU. It officially left on January 2020. If you land on a utility space in Monopoly and it's owned by someone, your rent depends on how much you roll. With one utility, you owe 4 times your roll. But if they own both, boom, 10 times the amount. That's how water and electricity can shock your wallet faster than Boardwalk with a hotel. Before digital cameras, photographers used film. To see all their shots from one roll, they laid out something called a proof sheet. It showed tiny versions of each picture so they could pick the best one to enlarge. It was like a contact sheet of memories. Little photo soldiers waiting to see who gets picked for glory. Nathan Pritikin believed in something simple. Eat clean and you might just save your heart. He didn't just say it, he lived it. He championed a low-fat, low-cholesterol diet so fiercely, people wrote a book about him called The Man Who Healed America's Heart. His ideas helped a nation rethink what went on their plates. Alfred Dreyfus was a French officer wrongly blamed for spying. The fact that he was Jewish made things even worse. He was shamed, jailed, and called a traitor. But years later, the truth came out. He was innocent. That one case shook all of Europe and shouted out how dangerous lies and prejudice can be. The human stomach is surprisingly stretchy, but at its relaxed size, it holds about a quart. That's the same as a big carton of milk. It doesn't look like much, but it expands when you eat. So next time you're stuffed after dinner, remember, you just maxed out your stomach's stretchy little pouch. Space Mountain isn't just one ride. It's a series of adventures across different Disney parks. Since its launch in the 70s, it's had 5 unique versions, each with different tracks, sounds, and lights. From sharp turns to starry tunnels, every version makes riders feel like they've been shot into space with nothing but screams and stardust. Inside your leg is a bone called the fibula. It's skinny and often overlooked, but it plays a big role in balance. The name comes from Latin and means clasp. like a little fastener holding things together. It may not carry the weight like your big shin bone, but it's quietly keeping you on your feet. In ancient Japan, there was a brutal weapon called a kanabo. It looked like a giant club covered in metal knobs. Samurai warriors used it to crush armor and shatter defenses. One swing could end a battle. It wasn't elegant or graceful. It was raw force in wood and steel, made to turn power into victory. Lincoln is the capital of Nebraska and was named after Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States. Jefferson City is the capital of Missouri, named after Thomas Jefferson, the 3rd President. Madison is the capital of Wisconsin and takes its name from James Madison, the 4th President. All 3 cities reflect presidential history through their names. During the English Civil War and the interregnum period from 1642 to 1660, all public theaters in England were officially closed by the Puritan-led government. The ban remained in place until 1660, when the monarchy was restored and theaters were allowed to reopen. At the 1996 Academy Awards, Emma Thompson won the Oscar for Best Adapted Screenplay for Sense and Sensibility. She was also nominated for Best Actress for her role in the same film, making her one of the few individuals recognized for both writing and acting in a single year. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, is part of the Department of Health and Human Services. They're the team that handles outbreaks, spreads awareness, and keeps an eye on anything that might threaten public health. They're like medical detectives, working behind the scenes to protect millions, armed with data instead of badges. The city of Nashville, Tennessee, wasn't just named at random. It was named after a general called Francis Nash, who fought during the Revolutionary War. Funny twist? He was also an ancestor of the famous poet Ogden Nash. So music and poetry flow in Nashville's bloodline. Long before space telescopes became real, a smart guy named Lyman Spitzer dreamed one up. In the 1940s, he wrote about placing a telescope far above Earth's clouds, where it could see clearly into space. His idea came more than a decade before satellites even existed. Without him, we might never have met Hubble. Josephine Cochrane was tired of washing dishes, so she built a machine in her shed, with the help of a mechanic named George Butters, that would change everything. Her invention became the first successful dishwasher. It didn't just save time, it gave freedom to millions of hands. From backyard tinkering to kitchen revolution, her legacy sparkles with every plate. Angelo Siciliano wanted to be strong, like really strong. He trained, built his body up, and transformed into Charles Atlas, the man people once called the most perfectly developed human alive. His name became legend in comic books and ads, helping skinny kids everywhere dream of turning muscles into armor and weakness into unbeatable power. Babe Didrikson Zaharias didn't just win medals, she rewrote what people thought women could do in sports. She earned gold in track and field at the Olympics, then switched over to golf and dominated there too. Reporters named her best female athlete 6 different times. She didn't just play, she crushed boundaries and left records trembling behind her. In Arizona, there's a twist in land you wouldn't expect. The Navajo Indian Reservation is massive, and right in the middle of it, like a small island, sits the reservation of another tribe, the Hopi. It's like one nation wrapped inside another, a quiet reminder of how deep history winds through the desert. The writer J.M. Barrie once said that life is a long lesson in humility. He's the same guy who gave the world Peter Pan, a boy who never wanted to grow up. Maybe Barrie believed that growing up wasn't just about age, but about learning how small we really are in a giant, surprising world. Before it was called Better Homes and Gardens, the magazine was known as Fruit, Garden, and Home. That sounds like a shopping list, but it slowly grew from a cozy household guide into a massive lifestyle brand. What began with apples and flowers bloomed into one of the most loved home magazines in America. There's a tiny part at the base of your brain called the hypothalamus. Sounds complicated, right? But its job is to control the pituitary gland, known as the body's master gland. That tiny duo is like the control center for hormones, helping your body grow, sleep, and feel. They're the brains behind the scenes magic makers. In The Wizard of Oz, the wizard isn't just called Oz. He has a ridiculously long name. Oscar Zoroaster, Fadrig, Isaac Norman Henkel, Emmanuel Ambroise Diggs. Seriously, it's like his parents wanted to use the whole alphabet. Thankfully, everyone stuck with just Oz. The phrase hoi polloi comes from Greek and means the common people, or the masses. But lots of folks get it wrong and use it to mean fancy or high class. Ironically, misusing that word kind of proves the point. It shows just how tangled language can get when we try to sound smarter than we are. Spam is a canned, pre-cooked meat product introduced by Hormel in 1937. Decades later, the word spam started being used for unwanted emails thanks to a Monty Python sketch that repeated the word endlessly. Hormel couldn't stop the slang, so they leaned into it, writing spam in all capital letters to help people tell the difference between their product and digital junk mail. Astronomers don't just have one way to measure a year. There are solar years, lunar years, equinoctial years, and sidereal years. Each one tracks time in a slightly different way, depending on the Earth, moon, stars, or seasons. Turns out, even time likes to play dress-up and wear different names, depending on who's watching the sky. In Forrest Gump, Tom Hanks sat on a little park bench telling his life story, and that bench became legendary. It was located in Chippewa Square in Savannah, Georgia. Tourists came from everywhere to sit where Forrest did, hoping maybe, just maybe, life really is like a box of chocolates and you never know what's coming next. Jethro Tull wasn't just the name of a rock band. It was also a real person. He lived in the 1700s and helped change farming forever by perfecting something called the seed drill. That machine planted seeds in neat rows instead of scattering them. Tull made farming smarter, turning dirt and seeds into science. There's a swimming pool under the White House press briefing room. It was built for President Franklin D. Roosevelt, who used it for therapy. Later, they covered it up with floors and walls to make space for reporters and cameras. But that little pool still hides below, a quiet ripple beneath presidential headlines. The Harlem Globetrotters sound like they were born in Harlem, but they actually came from Chicago. And they didn't even play in Harlem until the late 60s. Still, they took that name and bounced into basketball history, spinning balls, pulling pranks, and dazzling fans with moves that felt more like magic than sports. When jellyfish get together, it's not called a group or a swarm. It's called a smack. Yep, a smack of jellyfish. Sounds like something out of a comic book. And if you've ever been stung by one, you know the name fits. It's a soft, wobbly word that somehow still packs a sting. The very first purpose-built gas station was built in St. Louis, Missouri, back in the early 1900s. Before that, gasoline was something you might buy at a pharmacy, like soap or candy. But when people started driving cars more, they needed a place just for fuel. That little station pumped the future full of power. You're not here by accident. The fact you made it this far? That's rare. Don't just vanish. Tap subscribe and leave a trace in the comments. A fancy word for baby stroller is perambulator, or pram for short. It was invented in the 1700s by a guy named William Kent for the kids of the Duke of Devonshire. Picture a royal baby being wheeled around like a tiny king. It wasn't just transportation, it was baby luxury on wheels. In Salt Lake City, there's a place called Temple Square, and it's packed with stunning buildings. There's the Salt Lake Temple, the Tabernacle, the Assembly Hall, and even a statue called the Seagull Monument. Temple Square is a prominent 10-acre complex. Japan built a suspension bridge so long it could wrap around the Earth more than 7 times if you laid out its cables end to end. That's the Akashi Kaikyo Bridge. It stretches across water like a giant metal snake, connecting cities and holding strong against earthquakes. The bridge connects the city of Kobe on the Japanese mainland to Awaji Island, spanning the Akashi Strait. Back in the day, kids across America learned to read using the Dick and Jane books. These simple, friendly stories were created by William Gray and Zerna Sharp. Generations of students met their first words through these pages, one sentence at a time. A Canadian doctor and a soldier named John McCrae wrote a poem called In Flanders Fields during World War I. It talked about red poppies growing between graves. The words were soft but powerful, making readers stop and feel the weight of war. That poem became a symbol of remembrance, and poppies still bloom for the fallen today. The northernmost point of the South American continent is Punta Galinas, located on the Guajira Peninsula in northern Colombia. It marks the top edge of the continent, jutting into the Caribbean Sea. Remote and windswept, the area is part of indigenous Wayuu territory and is known for its desert landscapes, sand dunes, and strong cultural traditions. The black box in an airplane, the one that records everything, isn't actually black. It's bright orange. That color makes it easier to find in wreckage. So the thing with the darkest name is actually the brightest tool in a crisis. Funny how the most important stuff often hides behind a misleading name. Before anyone ever picked up a phone, people were already faxing messages between London and Paris. Yup, 11 years before the telephone was even invented, the world saw its first commercial telefax system. Imagine sending pictures and documents across borders while most people were still writing letters by candlelight. That's old-school tech with next-level imagination. The Rocky Mountain columbine isn't just a flower. It's a fluttery burst of purple and white that represents all of Colorado. It grows high in the mountains like a tiny star resting on the ground. With its graceful petals and soft colors, it's a natural crown for a state built from sky-touching peaks and wild open spaces. At the center of the Taj Mahal, under that giant white dome that glows in the moonlight, are two people, Mumtaz Mahal and Shah Jahan. He built the entire thing to honor her after she passed away. Mumtaz Mahal died in 1631 during childbirth, and Shah Jahan commissioned the Taj Mahal as a mausoleum to honor her memory. Cashews aren't really nuts. They're seeds, and their shells are trouble. That outer shell is toxic, so people have to remove it carefully before you ever get to snack on one. It's like nature wrapped this tasty treat in armor that stings, daring anyone to unlock the buttery treasure hidden inside. There was a day in music history that no one has ever repeated. On April 4th of 1964, the Beatles held every one of the top 5 spots on the Billboard pop charts. All 5. It was like the world hit played on nothing but their music. For a moment, they didn't just rule the charts. They were the charts. There came a year when the world built more cars than ever before. Over 60 million of them. That means about 165,000 brand new cars rolled out every single day. Streets filled up, factories buzzed, and it felt like the whole world was driving into the future. Tires spinning and engines roaring. Gore Verbinski, the director behind Swashbuckling Pirates and a Lizard Named Rango, is one of the biggest earners in movie history. He's best known for the first 3 Pirates of the Caribbean movies and even won an Oscar for an animated tale. Verbinski started as a musician before moving into directing commercials and then feature films. Most state flags are pretty plain, but Washington decided to go bold. It's the only one that includes the image of a United States president, George Washington himself. The flag was designed by the Daughters of the American Revolution in 1914 and officially adopted on March 5, 1923. The Andean condor is one of the largest flying birds in the world, with a wingspan that can reach up to 3 meters or about 10 feet. It appears on the coats of arms of Colombia, Ecuador, Bolivia, and Chile, symbolizing power, freedom, and the spirit of the Andes. Teddy Roosevelt, one of the most rugged presidents ever, once tried to take "In God We Trust" off American money, but not because he was against faith. He thought putting God's name on something like money was disrespectful. For him, cash wasn't holy enough to carry sacred words. That's devotion with a sharp sense of honor. Several iconic musicians died at the age of 27, a pattern often referred to as the 27 Club. Janis Joplin died in 1970 from a drug overdose. Jimi Hendrix also died in 1970 from asphyxiation related to drug use. Jim Morrison died in 1971 of heart failure under unclear circumstances. Kurt Cobain died in 1994 by suicide. William McGeer Tweed ran New York politics with an iron fist and a fat wallet. But people didn't call him that. They called him Boss. Through Tammany Hall, he controlled votes, money, and power like a king behind the curtain. He wasn't just a man. He was a machine, greased by corruption and fear. Before it was called table tennis, the game we now know as ping pong had a weird name. Gossamer. That was back in the late 1800s. Players bounced tiny balls across dinner tables, and the sound, ping, then pong, eventually gave the game a new name. But Gossamer? That sounds more like a wizard's spell than a sport. In ancient China, the Manchu dynasty made men wear a strange hairstyle called the queue. It looked like a long braided ponytail at the back, with the front of the head shaved. It wasn't just fashion. It was a symbol of loyalty to the emperor. Hair became politics, and scissors could mean rebellion. You know those villains in James Bond movies always causing trouble? Some of them are part of a shadowy group called Spectre. That name isn't random. It stands for Special Executive for Counterintelligence, Terrorism, Revenge, and Extortion. Basically, if it's evil, they're into it. They're not just bad guys. They're organized bad guys with business cards. Bobby Hatfield and Bill Medley had voices that made hearts melt. Together, they became the Righteous Brothers. Their songs weren't just music. They were deep, soulful waves. When random ads pop up during your messaging chats, it's not just spam, it's called spim. That's short for spam over instant messaging. It's like the digital version of an uninvited guest crashing your party just to hand you a flyer. When the Northwest Territory was split up, Ohio was the first to rise from its pieces. It became a state in the early 1800s, stepping into the spotlight as the new kid on the American block. From wild frontier land to statehood, Ohio helped kick off the next big chapter of the country's expansion. When the Titanic sank, many lives were lost, but none richer than John Jacob Astor IV. He was one of the wealthiest men in the world at the time, but money couldn't save him. In that icy ocean, class didn't matter. His story reminds us that even fortunes can sink when tragedy strikes. Each year on Independence Day, Americans consume over 150 million hot dogs. That's enough to stretch from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles more than 5 times. The tradition has become a staple of 4th of July celebrations across the country, combining food, festivity, and national pride in one classic, mustard-covered bite. Dr. Kay Scarpetta is a fictional forensic pathologist created by author Patricia Cornwell, and she's the central figure in a series of 23 crime novels. Introduced in the 1990s post-mortem, Scarpetta uses forensic science and investigative skills to solve complex murder cases. The series helped popularize forensic crime fiction. Herb Kahn looked at the moody young poets of the 50s and gave them a nickname, beatniks. He mashed beat culture with the Russian word Sputnik, and suddenly these freethinkers had a label. The name stuck, and the beatnik image, berets, jazz, and deep thoughts, became a whole vibe that shaped culture and poetry in smoky coffee shops everywhere. A weaver, written as WB, might sound like a new dance move, but it's actually a scientific unit. It measures magnetic flux, which is basically how much magnetic field is flowing through something. If magnets had a secret language, this would be their measuring stick. It's like telling the strength of invisible magical threads. In 1927, Charles Lindbergh became the very first person named Man of the Year by Time magazine. He'd just flown across the Atlantic Ocean all by himself, which was unthinkable back then. One guy, one plane, one enormous ocean. That flight turned him into a hero and gave him a place in the sky. Betty White didn't just make people laugh, she made history. Starting in the early 50s, she collected Emmy nominations like they were candy. Over her career, she got more than 20 nominations and won several. In the early 1900s, a U.S. Surgeon General named Walter Wyman helped create a hospital in Hawaii specifically for people with leprosy. It was a bold move to treat a disease that scared many, and he showed that science should never turn its back on the sick. It was medicine with a heart. The original Ferris wheel was a giant wonder built for the Chicago World's Fair. It was so massive, it could carry more than 2,000 people at once. It stood about 264 feet, 80 meters tall, making it the tallest attraction of its time. The wheel had 36 cars, each capable of holding up to 60 people, allowing it to carry over 2,000 passengers at once. Truly a spinning city in the sky. Long John Silver's didn't start near the ocean. It began in Lexington, Kentucky, a landlocked place far from the sea. But people there still loved fried fish and hush puppies. That one little store grew into over 1,000 seafood spots. The name sounded like a pirate, and the food made you feel like a treasure hunter. Salome, a mysterious dancer from an ancient story, once performed the Dance of the Seven Veils. That tale inspired an Oscar Wilde play and even an opera by Richard Strauss. Her swirling, hypnotic moves became famous, mixing beauty with danger. It was a dance that spoke without words, and every step carried a secret. King James V of Scotland wore a crown before he could even walk. He became king when he wasn't even 2 years old. Imagine still needing help to eat while also ruling a kingdom. He had grown-ups running the show until he was older, but technically the royal throne had some baby shoes under it. Jerry Rice holds the record for the most receiving yards in NFL history, finishing his career with 22,895 yards. Widely regarded as the greatest wide receiver of all time, he played primarily for the San Francisco 49ers. His precise route running, work ethic, and consistency set a standard few have matched, making his record some of the toughest to beat in football history. A heptagon is a shape with 7 sides and 7 angles. It's not as famous as a triangle or a square, but it still has its own special place in geometry. If you were building a superhero base and wanted it to stand out, a heptagon floor plan would definitely do the trick. Michael Bublé croons with charm and sells albums by the millions, but when it comes to the pop charts in the U.S., he has had only one major hit on the U.S. pop charts, his cover of Haven't Met You Yet. Still, his smooth voice fills Christmas playlists and wedding dances. Sometimes success isn't measured by charts, it's measured by how many hearts your songs sneak into. The word hatha comes from Sanskrit and literally means force yoga. It's the kind of yoga that focuses on physical effort and body control. Imagine holding poses that stretch your body and calm your brain. Nelson Rockefeller kept winning elections in New York, 4 times to be exact. He was governor for over a decade and played a huge role in state politics. He was the kind of guy who shook hands, made speeches, and built up cities. His last name already echoed power, and he made sure it stayed loud. The gunfight at the OK Corral was one of the fastest showdowns in history. Cowboys squared off, guns blazed, and within 30 seconds, it was over. That half-minute became the stuff of legends. Books, movies, and cowboy myths all sprouted from that dusty little moment in Tombstone, Arizona. The Wild West didn't need much time to get wild. In Arabic, the word sheikh means old man. But it's more than just age. It's respect. A sheikh is the head of a tribe or village, someone who leads with wisdom. They're like village elders, except with authority woven into every word. In their world, gray hair isn't just age, it's a crown. The Big 4 film schools aren't in Hollywood exactly, but they're close. 2 are in Los Angeles, USC and UCLA. The other 2 are in New York, NYU and Columbia. These schools train directors, writers, and movie magicians. If film was a kingdom, these places would be the castles where screen dreams are forged. Francesco Scavullo didn't just take photos. He captured what glamour looked like for decades. He's the guy who created the Cosmo Girl look, with bold eyes, shiny lips, and confidence for miles. His camera didn't just flash. It made fashion freeze in time, framing beauty as something fierce, fearless, and forever stylish. Eyjafjallajökull is a volcano in Iceland that erupted in 2010, releasing a massive ash cloud that disrupted air travel across Europe for several days. The eruption grounded thousands of flights due to safety concerns. Charles Ebbets loved baseball so much he sold half of his team shares just to build Ebbets Field. That stadium became home to the Brooklyn Dodgers, echoing with cheers, chants, and the sound of bat meeting ball. His dream became bricks and benches. Sometimes, to build something unforgettable, you have to bet it all. You've probably seen those numbers at the end of your address, right? That ZIP code? Well, ZIP stands for Zone Improvement Plan. It's not just a number. It's a way to move mail faster. Elvis Presley once got a chance to perform at the Grand Ole Opry, the heart of country music. He booked an entire month, but after just one show, they kicked him out. They didn't get his wild style. But the king wasn't fazed. He took his music somewhere else and ended up changing the world instead. If you've ever seen the tiniest drop of liquid fall from a spoon, that drop is just 1/60th of a teaspoon. It's so small, you'd need 60 to fill up one spoon. But even something that tiny can change a recipe or add the perfect twist to a magic potion. The fizzy word seltzer actually comes from a little German town called Niederselters. People there had natural mineral springs, and the sparkling water that bubbled up became so popular, they named the whole fizzy idea after the place. So next time you sip seltzer, you're really tasting a tiny village's sparkling claim to fame. Lord Hastings was one of the earliest high-profile executions inside the Tower of London, but he was not the first ever. William Hastings, 1st Baron Hastings, was beheaded without trial on June 13, 1483, on Tower Green by order of Richard, Duke of Gloucester, who later became Richard III. In space talk, the word magnitude means how bright something looks in the sky. The lower the number, the brighter the light. The moon glows at -12.6, and the sun dazzles at -26.7. So stars may sparkle, but those two light up the sky like cosmic flashlights on full beam. The Danish royal family has been ruling for over 1,000 years. That makes it the oldest monarchy still going strong in all of Europe. Crowns, castles, and royal traditions have passed through generations like stories whispered through centuries. Its origins trace back over 1,000 years, with the first historically recognized king, Gorm the Old, reigning in the early 10th century. That X in Xmas isn't trying to erase Christ. It actually comes from the Greek letter chi, which was used as a symbol for Christ hundreds of years ago. So when people shorten Christmas that way, they're not disrespecting it. They're using ancient code, like writing a message in history's secret handwriting. The phrase, "see you next Wednesday," hides like an Easter egg in almost everything director John Landis made, including the music video for Thriller. It was the name of a fake script he wrote as a teen, and he kept sneaking it into his movies. It's like his personal wink to anyone paying close attention. Daniel Webster was a major political figure in the 19th century, serving as a U.S. Senator, Secretary of State, and one of the most powerful orators of his time. He did turn down the vice presidency twice, and in a strange twist, both presidents who offered him the role later died in office, meaning he unknowingly passed on a direct path to the presidency. Australia is home to some of the world's deadliest spiders, but believe it or not, no one had died from a spider bite there for 37 years, until a young man passed away in 2016. Nature can be peaceful for decades, but sometimes it taps you on the shoulder with a reminder of its hidden power. William Mitchell wasn't just a food chemist. He was a candy wizard. He invented Tang and the exploding candy pop rocks. Over his career, he grabbed 70 patents. Every time you hear a fizzy crackle or taste space dust on your tongue, that's Mitchell's mad food science, working its sweet, strange magic. Grant Wood painted one of America's most famous artworks, American Gothic, the one with the farmer holding a pitchfork. But before that, he was just a kid who loved crayons. He even won a Crayola coloring contest. That means even great artists started with scribbles, coloring inside, and definitely outside the lines. When it comes to oil, the biggest foreign supplier to the United States isn't some distant desert. It's Canada. That's right. More oil flows across that chilly northern border than from anywhere else. They don't just share snow and hockey. They're quietly powering the engines of millions of cars driving down American highways. The star-nosed mole is one of the weirdest animals alive. Its nose has 22 pink, finger-like feelers that twitch and wiggle like alien antennas. It uses them to see underground in total darkness. It may look like a creature from a cartoon, but that mole is a high-speed burrower with super senses on its face. John Glenn became the first American to orbit the Earth in 1962 aboard Friendship 7. After that groundbreaking mission, he served 4 full terms as a United States Senator from Ohio. He chose not to seek re-election in 1998 and retired in early 1999. He passed away in 2016, nearly 17 years after ending his political career. In gym talk, work in doesn't mean punching a clock. It means sharing a machine. One person does their set, then hops off so the next person can take their turn. It's like a fitness version of passing the basketball. You don't hog the weights. You share the burn. In the Hebrew Bible, the Book of Lamentations is a collection of 5 powerful poems mourning the fall of Jerusalem. The words are raw and heavy, full of sorrow and beauty. It's not just ancient writing. It's the heart of a city crying out through lines that still echo across thousands of years. There's a myth from ancient Greece where a woman named Arachne challenged the goddess Athena in a weaving contest. Arachne lost, of course, and Athena turned her into a spider so she could keep spinning forever. That's how the Greeks explained spiders. So next time you see a web, remember, it's ancient punishment in motion. Tai Chi might look like slow dancing, but it's a graceful martial art filled with poetic moves. 2 of the coolest names are White Crane Spreads Wings and Step Back and Repulse Monkey. They sound like kung fu ballet and feel like meditation in motion, gentle, balanced, and surprisingly powerful. In the rain-soaked forests of Central Africa lives a weird but fascinating animal called the giant otter shrew. It doesn't look like a shrew or an otter, really, but it is the world's largest insectivore. That means it munches more bugs than any other bug eater its size. It's like a vacuum cleaner with whiskers and claws. Way down in southern Mexico, there's a state called Oaxaca that's unlike any other. More than half of all the country's indigenous people live there. It's filled with ancient languages, handmade crafts, and traditions that go back thousands of years. It's a living museum where culture dances through every market and mountain. Queen Elizabeth II became queen on February 6, 1952, following the death of her father, King George VI. At the time, she was in Kenya on a royal tour, not in England. One moment she was a princess abroad, and the next she was monarch of the United Kingdom. The crown awaited her return home. When the Secret Service talked about President Jimmy Carter over radios, they didn't say his name. They used the word deacon. That was his secret code name. Every president gets one. Carter's nickname matched his calm, thoughtful personality. It made him sound less like a commander and more like someone you'd trust to quietly fix the world. Alaska looks like it's just floating out there, but it touches Canada too. It shares its border with 2 Canadian regions, British Columbia and the Yukon Territory. That makes it one of the few U.S. states connected more to wilderness than cities. Snow, silence, and wild animals don't care where one country ends and the next begins. There was an inventor named Ralph Teeter who couldn't see. He was completely blind, but he still figured out how to make something millions of drivers now use every day. Cruise control. He couldn't see the road, but he made cars smarter. That's how vision isn't always about eyes. It's about seeing the world in your mind. Patrick Ewing wasn't always an NBA legend. Before joining the pros, he led Georgetown University to the national championship game 3 times. He won it all in the year 1984. He was like a college basketball superhero, blocking shots, scoring points, and giving fans someone to believe in. He made every court feel like destiny. In the early 90s, a woman named Tansu Çiller did something no one in Turkey had done before. She became the nation's first female prime minister. In a world dominated by male leaders, she rose to the top. guiding a country and breaking old traditions with every confident step she took into history. Only 3 players in the history of Major League Baseball have ever hit over 700 home runs. Babe Ruth did it first, then Hank Aaron chased him down, and finally, Barry Bonds knocked them all out of the top spot. Swing after swing, they turned baseball into a fireworks show of power. In the early 1400s, Scotland got something it had been fighting for: freedom. England finally signed a treaty saying Robert the Bruce was the rightful king of the Scots. That paper didn't just end a war, it crowned a hero. Robert wasn't just a man with a sword. He was a symbol for every voice shouting to be free. On top of a windy hill in Scotland called Dunsinane sits the ruins of Macbeth's castle. It's the same Macbeth who inspired Shakespeare's dark and haunting play. Stones crumble now, but back then, those walls echoed with secrets, ambition, and fate. Left-handed catchers in baseball are super rare, like unicorns wearing mitts. Since the early 1900s, fewer than 10 have ever played in the big leagues. It's not because they're bad, just because the game is set up in a way that favors right-handers. So when a lefty does it, that's pure baseball rebellion. Ringo Starr, born on July 7, 1940, was the quiet pulse behind the Beatles' storm. He was the oldest of the Fab Four, the one who sat behind the drums while the world screamed for the others. Imagine kicking off a show that would become legendary, and your first guest is Hollywood royalty. On October 1, 1962, Johnny Carson made his Tonight Show debut, and the very first guest wasn't a comedian, but the iconic actress Joan Crawford. Back in the early 1900s, someone invented something called Crisco, a white, thick shortening made from vegetable oil. It looked weird, but made the food super crispy. There was a senator named Thomas Hart Benton who didn't just sit in meetings, he roared for change. From Missouri, he believed people should move west, explore and build. He talked about it nonstop. In the 1950s, meteorologists decided to stop calling storms things like Tropical Storm Number 3 and began using female names instead, making hurricanes more memorable and a bit more eerie. Back when Motown music was just starting, singers didn't have fancy studios. They recorded songs in a simple warehouse on West Grand Boulevard in Detroit. The place was plain, but the sound that came out was pure gold. Spuds MacKenzie became the party-loving face of Bud Light commercials in the 80s. Everyone thought Spuds was a cool dude dog. But guess what? Spuds was actually a girl named Honeytree Evil Eye. Yup, behind the sunglasses and stardom was a four-legged lady who fooled the whole world while wagging her tail through fame. There was a game show called the $64,000 Question that aired in the 50s and gave away an unbelievable amount of prize money. In just over a year, it handed out more cash than most could dream of. Johann Sebastian Bach's Goldberg Variations weren't written for concert halls. They were meant for quiet nights. The piece was commissioned by Count Hermann Karl von Kaiserlink, the Russian ambassador to the Saxon court, who struggled with insomnia. He asked for soothing music, and Bach delivered it through Johann Gottlieb Goldberg, a skilled harpsichordist who played the variations to help the Count fall asleep. In the movie Lara Croft Tomb Raider, The Cradle of Life, Lara Croft, played by Angelina Jolie, is on a high-stakes mission to find Pandora's box, an ancient artifact said to contain all the evils of the world. Alicia Keys stepped into the music world and absolutely set it on fire. In her first big year, she grabbed 5 Grammy Awards, including the top titles like Best New Artist and Song of the Year for Fallen. That song felt like heartbreak and healing in one voice. In the opening of Gilligan's Island, there's a quick shot of a flag flying at half-mast. It's easy to miss, but it was done to honor the recent assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Chitty Chitty, Bang Bang was a wild musical ride of a movie about a magical car that could fly and float. But here's the fun twist. It came from the same author who wrote the James Bond books. That's right, the man who created Secret Agents also invented a flying car powered by love and sugar. Peter Gabriel had his final #1 song on the U.S. charts back in the 80s with a wild, creative hit called Sledgehammer. The music video was packed with weird clay animations and funky colors. If you made it this far, you're not like most people. Most click away. But you stayed. That means these truths meant something. Now tell me, which fact hit you the hardest? Scroll down. I want to know what stayed in your head.